actually, I'll just hold on a second, I'll pull from another prompt I have. So this is, of course, right now you guys are focusing on your annotated bibliographies, but this is how you organize your paper. Once you do your annotated bibliography. So normally you have, as far as an introduction goes, you have, this is pretty basic essay writing stuff, but you always have your attention grabber. A good way to grab the reader's attention is oftentimes through a quote, an interesting fact, an interesting statistic, something like that. Steinbeck's full of no shortage of good quotes, right, to kind of help get you started and kind of begin your analysis. You want to introduce what your topic is in those introductions, so somehow get around to your point. So and then you're going to provide your thesis. Be sure to list your premises. So remember, your thesis is the organizing sentence that organizes and governs the whole paper. In a lot of my classes, I give people a formula to follow, but at this point with you guys, I don't think that's necessary. You guys are seniors and you're all good writers. But you know what a thesis is. You have to have a claim and you have to have proof for your claim. That proof is called your premises. Usually it's a good idea to have at least 3 premises to kind of support your argument, maybe more. The lit review section, this is where you incorporate the research that you have done on your topic. So this is where you show patterns in the scholarship, sum up the relevant commentary on your topic, then give a brief analysis of what you're offering to the conversation. So basically, like let's say you're writing about Cannery Row, right? You kind of want to sum up the basic patterns that you see in the Cannery Row scholarship. And then after that, you can show how you're building on what others have said before you. So how is your argument different? What are you offering to the larger conversation on your book? I think all of you guys are starting to see that, what you have to offer compared to other scholars. And then when you get to your argument, remember the basics of good textual analysis, right? You have topic sentences. I like to compare these to burgers. Right? Topic sentence is the top bun of the burger. Analyze, interprets the bottom bun of the burger. Evidence is the meat. So your evidence comes from quoting the text, uh, arguing from the text, quoting the text. So, like, whatever your argument is, you have to give textual support to anchor yourself within the text. Paraphrase. You can also paraphrase the text. Oftentimes it's more effective to quote, though. And of course, also you can use your research articles to give proof for your claims as well. So, like maybe you're offering, and this doesn't just have to be one paragraph for each one of your premises either. Like maybe you would do something like quote the text, give your own analysis, and then you might start another paragraph talking about one of your sources, and then how one of your sources kind of goes along with your thinking on the topic, for instance. So, but you can use both your text as well as your research articles to provide evidence in this case. But you don't ever want to leave a quote hanging, right? Lots of times people do that. You want to analyze and interpret your text as well. So I always like to compare it to hammering a nail on the wall, right? When you provide evidence, you start the nail in the wall. When you analyze and interpret the text, you hammer the nail in the wall yourself. I'm going to cross this out. I don't think counter argument. Maybe you will have a counter argument section, maybe not. That's more of like a politics type structure for a politics type topic. Then your conclusion. So this looks like within part three will be the biggest chunk, right? So you'll have several paragraphs within part three. Part four is your conclusion, where you sum up your argument again, sum up your main thesis, your main premises, and your role within the scholarly conversation. I'll even add here, you might also anticipate future developments within Steinbeck scholarship. So, like, let's say, for instance, what you're writing about, maybe you didn't answer everything that you fully could have. You might even do something like a call for additional scholarship for people to kind of follow through on threads that you didn't finish yourself. So you can do something like that in your conclusion. Besides, so you want to kind of sum up your argument again, but also maybe just think about your argument's significance, and then what further studies, maybe you could anticipate what further studies on your novel, what kind of fruit that could bring. So I don't think I necessarily have to talk about in-text citations much. You guys are all seniors, you've written papers before, but just a quick review. If you state the author's name in the sentence, you don't have to put the author's name in the parentheses. If you don't state the author's name in the sentence, that's when you have to put the author's name in the parentheses. But let's say you quote from Cannery Row 4 times in a row before you jump to another source. You would only have to put Steinbeck the first time, and then the second, third, fourth times, you would just put the page number. So you don't have to put Steinbeck 34, Steinbeck 78, Steinbeck 96, whatever. If you quote from the same source multiple times in a row, you don't have to keep changing it up. But let's say you quote from let's say you quote from Steinbeck, let's say you quote from DeMott, let's say you go back to quoting from Steinbeck again, then you quote from Schillingwald, right? In every one of those cases, you would have to put the author's name because you keep changing your source. So even though you eventually go back to Steinbeck on the third citation, you still have to put his name again, just because every time you change, you have to cite. I'm not looking at the Google window. It says you raised your hand, LeBron. What question you got?
So I've got multiple sources from the same authors.
Mm-hmm.
So I have, I've got 2 Richard Astros.
Okay.
If I'm quoting from one Richard Astros, how do I differentiate the next quote from the second Richard Astros to the reader?
That's a good question. Give me a second. I'll look this up. It's been a long time since I've had to do that. So let me look up the rule. I'm pretty sure that you put a shortened version of the title in the in-text citation in that case to differentiate.
I will go look into that as well. But that sounds.
Let's see. I'm looking at Purdue.
Which is WebMD.com.
Let's see. I know how you do that on the works cited page, but I'm drawing a blank on what you do in the in text. Let's see.
Don't you do like author such and such and his paper blank says this, and then you
Yeah.
could say like in his other work titled, whatever it is, he goes on to say yada yada yada, and
That
then
makes sense. Don't do an
yeah,
in-text citation. Do
right, for the
an
remainder
introduction. That makes
after
sense.
that.
Thank you, Shane.
And then for the you're welcome. And then for the remainder after that, don't you do? You kind of keep referring back to that work that you're talking about. So that's how I do it. That's how I would do it.
I found the entry on Purdue Owl, but that is right, Shane. You can cite the different article inside the sentence. Then, like let's say you would put Astro, you would then know that that's a different article from Astro if you would put the name of the article in the sentence before the citation. But let's say you don't do that. There is an answer to this. Here it is. Yeah, I was right. My gut was right. That's what you do. So it says Murray states that writing is a process that varies with their thinking style. So they cite the title in the parentheses instead of the name in that case. Or it says if the author's name is not mentioned in the sentence, format your citation with the author's name followed by a comma followed by a shortened title of the work and the page number. So Elkins, comma, Visual Studies. So that's a shortened version of his title, 63. So that's how you do it. I think it's probably more elegant just to do it in the sentence, like Shane mentioned. But either way is correct. So if you want to take a picture of that Abron to save you time later, I'll let it hang for a second.
Already done.
Good. Yeah, and if you on your works cited page, if you quote multiple works from the same author, you do the full citation for. Let me see if I can find an example from my own writing. You put the full citation for the first, for alphabetical order, and then you put like a little squiggle line, 3 squiggles, and then put a period, and then do the rest of the citation yourself. Let's see. I'll show you. Here's an example from my article that I wrote on Grapes of Wrath. Let's see where. There it is. So like you see here that I quoted 3 different books from Richard Albee, and I also quoted 3 different things from John Budin. So this is the first document alphabetically, and then you don't have to keep putting the author for the next few. You just put a little squiggle line, period, and then you do the rest of your citation for all the other works that you cite from the same author. So you see with this one, Cosmic Evolution, that starts with a C, Individual Social Minds, I, and then the Social Mind, T. So you just kind of go, whichever full citation you give is the first one alphabetically, and then you just put the little squiggle for the next few lines, and then do the rest of your citation from there. Yeah, if you quote multiple Steinbeck books, you'll probably do that at least once in your paper. So like here, I quoted Argument of Phalanx, Indubious Battle, The Grapes of Wrath, Log of the Sea of Cortez, The Moon is Down, and Working Days, The Journals of the Grapes of Wrath. So the squiggle is how you approach that. Does that make sense?
Good to know. I'm trying to do the squiggle now.
Yeah, you just put a hyphen 3 times, 3 little hyphens, and then a period. So it'd be like Steinbeck, John, The Grapes of Wrath, then 3 little hyphens, period. The Moon is Down.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's easy.
Yeah, easy peasy. Remember Remember to do your hanging indents too. And this goes along with your annotated bibliographies as well. Remember that on your second, third, fourth lines of a citation, you need to do a hanging indent of 1/2 inch. I don't know if I've ever showed you guys that trick before. Let me, I have another document. I'll show it to you. I actually did not learn this trick until I went to grad school, which is kind of funny. I spent my whole time in undergrad doing this the hard way. Let me just remove it real quick. Okay. So, like, let's say that you have your citation here, and let's say it runs for 3 lines. Do a hanging indent. All you got to do is go to the second line, right click, click paragraph, go to special, hanging indent, 1/2 inch. Boom. You indent your citation correctly at that point. Rather than hitting the space bar and trying to use the ruler and all that, that's the far easier way to indent your citations correctly on your works cited page. So I don't know if you guys knew that trick. I might have showed you that trick in a previous class, but very easy to do. It's a little different on a MacBook. I'm pretty sure on a MacBook you have to well, you can do it this way on a PC too. Go up to where it says line and paragraph spacing. Click that, line spacing options, and it'll take you to the same screen where you can do your hanging indent. You can't right click on a Mac, so but that's how you do it on one of those. Had I showed you guys that trick before? Do you recall? I don't remember.
Not that I recall, no. That's good to know.
Yes,
I don't think so.
If you've ever written papers for me before and you use the old spacebar method, stop, because it's a lot easier to do it that way. Or if you've written your capstone or whatever, right? Do it that way. So I need to change this. This is for my instructions for another class. So our deadline for this paper will be due on April 26th. I'm going to say I'm going to have a lot of stuff to grade that weekend. So I'm going to say April 26th by 12 p.m. noon. Okay. So that's allowing you guys the maximum amount of time I really can, because I think they have to have grades submitted either on Monday or Tuesday of that week. So of the following week. So April 26th by 12 p.m. That'll be the day before graduation. So this will probably be the last thing that Shane and Hunter turn in before you graduate. So that gives you 2 weeks to write this. As far as the peer review, looking at that week of the 22nd to the 26th, what day do you think would be a good day for you guys to meet? to do a peer review. We won't have classes that week. You might have a final exam in another class. Probably not. There's not really many teachers in the English department. They get exams. But I don't know. We could do Tuesday at some point, Wednesday at some point, either in the morning or the afternoon. Wednesday seems like a good day to me because it's 2 days before the papers due. So that gives you plenty of time to enact any changes. You can have your whole draft done by Wednesday, and then you have 2 more days to make changes to it based on what we discuss. You guys all agree to that? Wednesday the 24th can be our very last meeting, and then we'll get together and talk about drafts, your drafts.
Works for me.
I think that sounds good.
Works for me too.
I guess that's just a matter of timing when we want to do it. Like I said, you guys shouldn't have any exams if you're mostly just taking class in the English department. Maybe you have another class in another department. Are you guys taking any classes that aren't like English or humanities? No? Okay.
Yeah, no, the only class that's a little different is interpersonal communication, but that's with Dr. Reese too, so I think all is well when it comes to like big finals that week.
Yeah, you just want to meet on that Wednesday at maybe like 2 p.m. or something. We can do that. That way we don't interfere with. But if we, so let's say we'll meet that Wednesday at 2 p.m. So around 12 on that day, try to, or send your paper to everybody in the class. Maybe we can have like an email chain going around. Send your paper to everybody in the class, and that'll give everybody time to read each other's papers. And we can get together as a group and talk about. I'd like for you guys to kind of write some notes. You don't have to like write deep notes as detailed as I would, but maybe like jot down some things. Like maybe Shane's argument lost you somewhere, right? Maybe you feel like LeBron could have developed this point more. Yeah, maybe you feel like Hunter should have talked about this, right? So that's all. I'd say just jot down some notes as you're reading, and then when we get together as a group, we can talk about what's going right with everybody's papers, but also what everybody could further develop with each other's papers. So we can all have a nice, cordial conversation geared towards improving before you submit your final draft. So I think that'll be a productive thing. That's a great thing to do in an advanced class because everybody's skill set is already up there. Everybody already has a high skill set. You guys are all experts on this stuff at this point because you've read it all. So I think that'll be nice. So I'll say here, rough draft will be due on Wednesday, April 24th by noon. Send your rough drafts out by email. We will get together at 2 p.m. to have a peer review session. So you guys feeling good? You guys feel good about the structure of it, how you organize and what I'm expecting and all that good stuff? I forgot to mention the page length. I'm making this a conference paper length, 7 to 8 pages long. Okay. 7 to 8 pages is usually a nice
Yes.
conference paper length. That, like, if you were going to go to a conference, that would be about the most that you could read out loud in 15 minutes. Okay. And then, of course, if you go, some of you guys might go over. If you go over that, that's fine. 7, 8 is probably a minimum number. Okay. You guys might go up to like 9 or 10, depending on how your argument shapes up. 7 to 8, I'll say, is the bare minimum. Yeah, that's a pretty. I could ask for a seminar length paper, which is like 12 to 15, and I'm holding mercy on you guys because I know you're all tired, right? Plus, I kind of want this to be more of a conference length paper anyway, because my hope is you do a really good job with it. Maybe you can present it at the conference. So I kind of want this to be a practical thing, not just an exercise. I'd like for you guys to maybe present it at the conference. So that's why I decided to do 7 to 8. So any further questions, comments, concerns before we turn it over to Hunter to discuss Sweet Thursday? All right, then. Well, Hunter, the floor is yours.
Okay, bear with me. I've never presented online before, so. What? I swear if it would let me, I would. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. This is my Sweet Thursday analysis, novel by John Steinbeck. For the historical context, I wrote that this novel was released in 1954. It is a sequel to Steinbeck's 19...
Let me stop you real quick, Hunter. You're not changing the slides.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, for some reason the Google Meet will not follow along with the slideshow presentation.
1 second.
It did that to me the first time I did one for you guys.
Now can we see it?
Yeah.
It's going?
Yeah.
Okay. For the historical context, I wrote that this novel was released in 1954. It is a sequel to Steinbeck's 1945 novel Cannery Row. Several historical events took place between the release of Cannery Row and the release of Sweet Thursday, such as the end of World War II, the start of the Cold War, the Korean War, and etc. The setting of the story takes place in Cannery Row shortly after the end of World War II. For biographical and literary context, I put in 1948, about 6 years before the release of this novel, Steinbeck was divorced from his second wife, and his close friend, Ed Ricketts, who is the real Doc from Cannery Row and in Sweet Thursday as well, passed away. In 1950, Steinbeck marries his third wife, Elaine Scott. Elaine was an actress, and this similarly led Steinbeck to develop an interest in making a musical. After finding out that there was some interest in turning Cannery Row into a musical, Steinbeck would go on to write Sweet Thursday as a novel that would be more easily adaptable to turn into a musical. For a summary of the story, I put, the story resumes after World War II. Doc was drafted into the war and eventually honorably discharged. After returning, Doc discovers that a few staples of the community Cannery Row and the characters in the previous novel have left. These characters include Lee Chong, who owned the grocery store, and the old brothel owner, Dora. Lee Chong's store, not story, has been taken over by a man named Joseph and Mary Rivas. The brothel is being ran by Dora's sister, whose name in the beginning of the novel is Flora, but somebody tells her that she seems more like a fauna, so she sticks with that, which is just like a funny scientific play on words. Doc feels that he is beginning to change. The quote-unquote low voice inside of him is constantly repeating lonesome, and he tries to find something to occupy his mind and time by throwing himself into his work and telling everyone that he is going to write this extravagant paper. Summary continued. Fauna is having trouble with a new girl who has came to her brothel, Susie. Susie is a new character who arrives at the Row pretty early on in the novel. Fauna begins to construct a plan to marry off Susie to Doc, and Mac and the boys begin to get worried that since the ownership of the Palace Flophouse is no longer with Lee Chong, they may have to start paying rent. So they begin to construct a plan to throw a party and auction off the Flophouse to Doc, simultaneously raising money to buy him a gift because they have noticed that he has been feeling down, and also it relieves them from the worry of having to pay for rent. I think it's interesting that all of the good deeds that Mac and the boys do throughout both novels are kind of like double-sided. Like, they do something good for someone else, they also have to get something good for themselves in it. After auctioning off the Flophouse to Doc, Doc tells Mac that Lee Chong left the Palace Flophouse to the boys and they owned it, and that he never told them because he figured they would do something like this. Fauna brings Susie to Doc in a wedding dress at this party, and Doc shakily accepts, but Susie does not. Fauna and Susie get into a scuffle where Susie admits that she loves Doc. Shortly after this, Susie leaves the brothel and goes to work at a diner. And Hazel, who is still hung up on an astrological sign reading from earlier in the novel and believes that he must be president one day, starts thinking that he has to become acquainted with making tough decisions in order to eventually be president. And he knows that sympathy will get Susie and Doc to make up, so he goes and breaks his arm. Doc cannot conduct his work or drive without his arm, so they get Susie to help him. Susie and Doc make up, and the boys give their gift to Doc, which they had been saving up for with the auction, which was a telescope rather than a microscope, but Doc accepts it and laughs it off anyways. And that was all of my summary. For some key passages, I put the stars say Hazel's going to be president of the United States, which was Fauna to the boys early on in the novel. I put this down as one of the key passages because I believe that although it's offered like it's going to be some sort of comedic relief early on in the novel, it does eventually lead to the novel's conclusion of Doc and Susie getting back acquainted with each other because of the action that Hazel takes, because he believes that eventually he's going to have to be president. The next key passage I put wasn't really a key passage in terms of like the plot of the story, but I put it in there because it reminded me of a quote from the end of To a God Unknown, where the main character goes to speak to the priest, and the priest says something along the lines of like, thank God he doesn't have any followers, because they would essentially view him as Jesus. And it's something similar that Doc says to the seer about midway through the novel. He says, don't ever gather disciples, they'd have you on a cross in no time. I just thought that was an interesting callback to a previous Steinbeck work we've read. Not really key to the central point or overall theme of the work, but just something interesting. Susie went out and Fauna said, I wonder if she might be for Doc. I included this as one of the key passages because the main theme of this story is eventually Doc overcoming his loneliness in my eyes. And they do that through Susie, and this is the first mention of Susie and Doc potentially being in a relationship. For two more key passages, I put, who told you you owned it? I didn't tell. This is Doc talking to Mac. Mac responds with, how do you mean, Doc? And Doc says, I didn't think Lee Chong told anybody but me. He was afraid you guys would do something like this. And this is in reference, it is shortly after they auction off the Palace Flophouse to Doc. It is in reference to that. And I thought that was a key event in the story, because it's really, once the story gets to that point, everything picks up and kind of begins to come into the final stretch. And for the last one, Doc said, "Susie, I love you," as Susie is on her way out of the door of his house. And Susie smiles and turns around and says, "Brother, you got yourself a girl." I thought that was, at least for me, that seemed to be where the entire story was leading. So I felt that was a fitting conclusion. And it's the first time they really express out loud their actual feelings for each other. For some interesting facts about this novel, I put there are several musical references to this novel, including songs named Sweet Thursday by various different artists, and there was even a band in the UK named Sweet Thursday. There is also a 1982 film called Cannery Row. I haven't seen it. I would imagine Dr. Yeager has. But it is apparently sort of a mesh between the two novels, having elements of both storylines in it. I know I read some of the summary of it, and I think it has the Susie storyline in that movie, which is obviously from Sweet Thursday. And as I referenced earlier in the literary context part of the presentation, this novel was written to be adopted into a musical, and it was a musical. You can see a flyer to it pictured to the right of your screen. It was called Pipe Dream, and it aired for several years. I think it had, I can't remember how many number of shows, but I know it was nominated for a couple awards. I don't think it ever won any. And for my discussion questions, I wrote, which book do you guys prefer, Cannery Row or Sweet Thursday?
That is a good question. What do you guys think?
I don't have a preference over the two. I like them both. I can't really pick one. I don't know. Sweet Thursday kept growing.
Yeah, for me it'd be Cannery Row. I mean, you can't beat the original. It's just how it is, like with songs. You know, usually the original singer's version is usually kind of better.
That's a tough one for me. Cannery, I think they're very much, even though Sweet Thursday is the sequel, very much get the feeling that they're two different books. They very much are two different books.
Oh goodness, sorry guys.
Cannery Row was both books share this overall melancholy. I think, like Doc's loneliness is kind of a key theme in both of the novels. But this one is a little more upbeat than Cannery Row. Cannery Row, yeah. I mean, think about all the, like when we talked about Cannery Row. Think back to that passage where Doc found the dead woman in the sea, right? Like that was like a devastating passage. Doc's loneliness at the end of the book while they're throwing the party for him. This book kind of shows human connections developing, right? Like the importance of human connection. Like even if you're brilliant like Doc, you still need that human connection. And the whole book seems to be about Doc's creative process, or Doc's process, right? He's stuck. He's in writer's block. He can't quite figure it out because he has so many other things on his mind. And basically, it seems kind of cliche, right? Love solves all, right? That's kind of the theme. But Steinbeck, I think he handles it beautifully. I think I like them both for different reasons. I think I actually like Sweet Thursday a little better.
I agree with you on that one. I don't
Well-
know. It's just the state of mind that I was in, like while I was reading both stories, was different, or what it was. But I felt like I could relate more to like Doc's character in this story than I could in the previous one. It might just be the final tweak stress and stuff getting to me, but
Yeah, I think the first book is funnier. I think the first book is now like hilarious book. Hilarious and melancholy at the same time. I don't really see there is humor in this one, but not as much. Um, yeah, I just think I think this book shows even how much places change with time too. Like I think if you read Just Sweet Thursday without reading Cannery Row, I think you would be missing something. Um, because the Cannery Row in the first one, like a lot of the characters like Mac and the boys have this like carefree spirit about them. And in this one, the world has changed. World War II changed everyone in some way, right? The Cannery Row is no longer the same place. Lee has been moved. Lee was the foundation of the town. Uh, the brothel has changed hands. It's very much a different town with different people. Some of the key people in Cannery Row are no longer there, right? Talks about how one of them died in the war. So, yeah, how much even like communities change with time. I think that's also a nice theme in the book that I thought really had some depth to it. I'm just kind of whacking through here about some of my faults. I'd forgotten a lot of it. It's been since I was an undergrad, since I've read this. It was almost like reading it for the first time. That's just some of my faults.
Did Sweet Thursday mention anything to do with Frankie?
No, it doesn't mention Frankie. It mentions some of the characters from the first one. It mentions the artist. It mentions the couple who lived in the boiler. Like it mentions some of those side characters in this, but I don't think not Frankie. I don't think.
for the next question, I had which new character did you guys find to be the most intriguing in this work? Joseph and Mary Rivas, Fauna, or someone else?
I felt like Joseph and Mary was needed, a necessary character for the plot to develop. And so I kind of feel like more of the story lent to his story. So I felt like he was kind of the more interesting one.
He's always trying to cheat at chess, right?
He just don't know how to manipulate the board yet.
That reminds me of some of my students will do anything to try to cheat, right? They spend more time trying to cheat than they would if they actually did the work. I think Susie's a pretty cool character. Like she does. I mean, I think Doc's attraction to her goes beyond just superficiality. And he keeps trying to talk himself out of it. Like, I'm highly educated, she's illiterate. Like, what are we going to talk about? What do you guys think why is Doc sort of attracted to Susie? Do you think beyond just appearances?
I know he says at some point in the novel that she's the only person that's ever been truly honest with him when she gives him like that harsh speech about the paper that he's writing.
Well, and another thing too is I think where Doc is in such a bad state mentally from all the things that he has been through, he's searching for something to give him love and somewhat like peace of mind, something to help him cope with his issues. So that could be a possibility there. And I also like how Steinbeck was playing with flora and fauna. Because originally with flora being like flowers, plants, beautiful things in nature, they choose to call her fauna, which is basically calling her an animal. So I just think that's funny how Steinbeck just puts all these things together and just throws them in there just for, like with a nice comedic touch. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
Even from a more scientific point of view, the flora fauna thing, Doc was more interested. Like Doc wasn't really interested in any of the flora type stuff. He was more interested in the sea creatures and the wildlife. And it was kind of funny that it was the wildlife that was telling, symbolically, I guess, wildlife telling Susie that she needed to go be with Doc. I kind of thought that was an interesting thing. And then going back to what you said about Doc dealing with his issues, his grief, PTSD from the war. So the real Ed Ricketts passed away, you said 6 years prior to this.
Yes.
I feel like Susie would be, Steinbeck's way of, wishing that his friend had a happier ending than what he did, and kind of his way of making that come to life was writing it in his story.
Yeah, I didn't include that in the final question, but I was going to bring it up. That the final question is, do you guys like how the story ended for Doc? I was also going to ask specifically Dr. Yeager if he thinks that the end of the story written for Doc was written that way because Ed Ricketts passed away, or if it would have stayed the same if he would still have been alive during the writing.
Yeah, I was reading. I was used to the Penguin Classics version of this, and I was reading the essay from the introduction essay to it, and I think Paul DeMott says it better than I could. Like he talks about the whole book like it's almost a eulogy for Ed, right? The real Ricketts died in he got hit by a train. He tried to cross the train tracks too late and got hit by a train. That's how he died in real life. I don't think it wasn't a suicide. It was just one of those freak accidents that happened. Yeah, the real Ed, he always struggled with love, right? He never really found anyone. He just kind of gravitated, like he was married a couple of times, but he struggled to maintain good relationships. Like he was kind of I don't want to slander the guy, but he kind of couldn't keep it in his pants, and he had a hard time maintaining a real relationship. So I do think that it was. I think the whole book's like almost like a love letter to his friend, right? Who never really found true connection as far as romantic entanglements go. So I think the whole book's almost a way for Steinbeck to finally create something out of his grief. Like oftentimes grief creates art, and yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Yeah, think about all the great art that's come from grief.
Which is pretty interesting why Steinbeck decided to call it Sweet Thursday. Because, I looked it up out of curiosity as to why, the term Sweet Thursday, and it says, well, because Sweet Thursday comes after Lousy Wednesday.
Right.
So like the unfortunate problems that happen in life, and then there's the light at the end of the tunnel, Sweet Thursday, So, it's pretty cool how he titled that, and still yet though there was a little bit of sweetness in the book, but as you said, there wasn't really anything that was really grounded, to have this life of love and happiness. There was still somewhat of a disconnect there for Doc, that he really couldn't establish that love life and really get happy. I mean, and the thing of it is with all of the issues that he was dealing with, and then how he was so caught up in his personal work. I mean, he couldn't really pull away from his scientific research. Although he was having writer's block, he was still pushing through trying to figure out something to get his mind off of the real world. So, and that could even be a lesson there, that so many times we get caught up in our own doings that we fail to focus on life as a whole, to really establish those connections with people, and to really find out or really find out the true meaning of relationship with people, and to not be, I guess you could say, self-centered, to go beyond your own self, and reach out to other people, because when you reach out to other people, that's what brings joy to life. That's how you cope with things. Of course, well, in addition to faith, but that's how you cope with things. It is really reaching out to people and talking with other people. So there's a lesson there.
Yeah, the book discusses how when Mac and the boys would come and talk to Ed, come and talk to Doc, he wouldn't pay attention to them. He would just kind of like barely listen.
Said something that he would zone out like in the middle of the conversation.
I think it's interesting that you mention that, Shane, because we have Hazel in the book, and Hazel, the joke in Cannery Road was Hazel just asks you questions, and he doesn't really care what the answer is. He just keeps the conversation going on with his endless questions. Or Hazel learns to listen in the book, and it fries his mind. Right? He doesn't. He's actually having a real conversation, not just dragging one on. So listening to others, maintaining connections, right? I think you're onto something there.
Well, that goes to that famous saying that, we shouldn't listen to respond. We should listen to understand.
Yeah, I remember that one scene in the novel where Matt comes over to Doc's house And as soon as he walks in, he starts talking. Doc's like, "How much money do you need?" and gives it to him, and then starts talking about his work. And then Mac has to like shake him out of it. And he's like, "Doc, it's me. I'm here." And then he's like, "Oh, how much money do you need?" And he's like, "I already got it."
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why Doc was so amused with the telescope at the end of the book too. Like the whole book's about him needing a microscope. And he knows Mac and the boys try. So I think he was honestly touched at the end by the connection he felt to them, that they tried so hard. And they got him. The telescope was a super expensive telescope.
The biggest one in the catalog.
The biggest one, right? The Sears Roebuck catalog.
But in some ways, just out of like simple thought and out of curiosity, I was looking at that work from T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, and how the first war messed with people psychologically, and I don't know if this is a good word to use, but it desensitized people in some ways, because it sort of pulled them away from life's reality, and I can only imagine the things that people have gone through, especially the people who were directly involved with war. So I think that is something that has to be taken into consideration when really looking at Doc's character. He's not your everyday person. I mean, this dude's been through it. So to compare Doc with someone else who has never dealt with the impacts of war, you don't have a good argument there. And because you have to look at Doc and really pull the top off of what he's faced there, and I think that will give you a good explanation as to why he is the way he is. But and there's even a lesson there to help those people who have been in the same place that Doc has been, especially when they build their own world and they don't go beyond their own world, and they don't really understand how to, contribute to society anymore because of the problems that he's got going on. And in some ways, this could probably go in with some of Steinbeck's disability studies in some way. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Yeager?
Yeah, I think so.
Because of the mental issues that he's got going on. So I don't know. It just seems like I keep going back to that, but I mean, it is a very important, issue there. And I've even seen it with my uncle. I have an uncle who he wasn't really involved with war, but some of the things that the military had him do, it truly messed with him psychologically. And there's things that he'll talk a little bit about, but there's some things that he will not talk with you about because it's messed with him. It's messed with his ability to function in our society. And I could go on, but it's truly a sad situation. And it's wonderful how Steinbeck includes this for his friend. But there's times of sadness if you really look into it. But at the same time, he adds a little bit of comedy to it. He gives a nice little balance there.
And I believe that is the end of my presentation. Yes. Thank you guys for listening.
Yep.
I can come back.
Make sure you submit the PowerPoint with Dropbox if you have it.
All right, I will.
Yeah, I think you had some good thoughts there, Shane. Like the modernist movement in literature was said to spring out of World War One, right? Because World War One caused so much, like the all modernist movement of art was let's make something new. The old ways are broken. This war, this great war, has shown that, right? Hundreds of thousands of people died, millions. Let's break away from the old and move to the new. And then World War II, the destruction was even greater. The world was coming off of all the destruction caused by Hitler and Mussolini. And it's often the postmodern movement of art sprang up after World War II. And have you guys ever, like in their major American authors or major British authors, have you guys talked to any about postmodernism in there?
Yes.
What titles and did you read, Ron? You know?
Give me a moment and I can pull it up.
We're still living in the postmodern age as far as art goes.
Now, postmodernism is also called late modernism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, contemporary postmodernism. Okay, I see this section.
Yeah, postmodernism is what a lot of literary theory has sprung out from. It's very much a movement that shows how texts can be fragmented. Like modernists did that too. Like they wanted to create new art that is fragmented, like the Wasteland, for instance, right? The Wasteland is probably the biggest. It's like if you read it, it's like trying to understand a puzzle. Right? It's almost like the meaning of it. You're trying to put puzzle pieces. Sometimes it feels like you're smashing the puzzle pieces. Postmodernism is a little more playful, right? It shows that the world is broken, the world is fragmented, but instead of getting nihilistic about it, like the modernists did, postmodernism oftentimes tries to show like the humor of all of this. The world is broken. The world is fundamentally broken, but let's laugh about it. Like that's oftentimes the kind of tone that postmodernist lit takes. And I think you can bet with what I just said, I think you can definitely classify this as a postmodern novel, right? Because it does have. It is about how the world is broken, how people are broken, but there's the treatment of that instead of going to straight up dark nihilism. It does so in a funny way. Wrong, you find the title.
Yeah, we've got Barn Burning by William Faulkner, Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, The Emperor of Ice Cream by Wallace Stevens, Spring and All, Queen Anne's Lace, The Widow's Lament in Springtime by William Carlos Williams, and Battle Royale by Ralph Ellison.
Yeah, Faulkner, the modernist, but some of those other writers you mentioned, like William Carlos Williams, for instance, he's a postmodernist. Have you guys ever read his poem, "The Red Wheelbarrow"? You guys ever read that?
I believe I have.
That sounds vaguely familiar, yeah.
I'll show it to you. Deviating from Steinbeck, but not really, because we're also talking about the movement that he's operating within. Here's the poem. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain water beside the white chickens. One of the most anthologized poems in literature right here, right? So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain water beside the white chickens. Yeah, that's what to really say about it. So many literary critics and stuff have tried to make this mean almost anything. Thousands of interpretations as far as like what this means. What does it mean by so much? So much depends upon the red wheelbarrow that's glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. What's that mean? It's driven people crazy for decades.
The only thing that I could think of it is so much depends upon a person who has been, because usually water means like a cleansing. So who has been cleansed and decides to stand out from the rest. Those red stands out big time.
Right? Why red instead of yellow or blue or something like that?
Right. But I don't know. I can see why there are thousands of interpretations.
Yeah, this is often said to be a postmodern poem, just because it's very much fragmented. Right? One, two, three, four syllables up on two, one, two, three syllables, barrow, two, glazed, one, with rain, three, water, one, beside, two, three, four, chicken, two. Even his form isn't really consistent. He doesn't have the same syllable count in each line. It's just a broken, fragmented poem, but it paints an image in your mind. It's a playful poem almost. Unlike The Wasteland, which is designed to confuse you, this is just simple but also fragmented. It's just an image. The poet puts an image in your mind. Yeah, T.S. Eliot, his only purpose was to show you how smart he was by giving you a million obscure literary references that you kind of try to make sense of. I don't know if I'm reading him cynically here, Shane, but I've always been cynical about The Wasteland. It's an exercise in showing how smart he is. That's how I've always read it.
It is wordy.
Right. It's always it's always fun teaching. Whenever I teach the World Lit 2, which isn't often, I mostly teach the World Lit 1. Mike Smith mostly does the 2. But every time I do World Lit 2, I like to teach the Wasteland just to melt the brains of all of my sophomore nursing and business majors. And I like to melt their brains by making them read the Wasteland.
What you try to do, break them down and build them back up?
I think that mostly just breaks them down. I don't know about by the end of the semester. I don't know. After they read that, they're just broken for the whole rest of the way. Just like Elliot. But I think this book, Sweet Thursday, I think you can definitely. I think Cannery Row is definitely a modernist book, right? It's kind of nihilistic, sad. It's funny, it's humor, but it also kind of leaves you with that same taste in your mouth that a lot of the modernist writers left you with. This one is much more playful, right? It plays around. Even, did you guys notice what he did with his chapters this time? It's different. It's different than any other work that he wrote. You guys notice what he did with chapters at the beginning of each chapter?
Kept them all on the same page, separated by like just the chapter. Chapter 1. Gave them their weird names.
Yep.
Hoop to doodle.
Yeah, in the intro to the book that I read, I don't know what everybody else was reading it on. It talked about that. It was Mac talking to like Whitey #1 and #2 about how if he met the dude who wrote Cannery Row, he would give him advice that each chapter should have a name that tells like what's going on in the chapter, because if he wants to go back in the book, chapter 5 doesn't mean anything to him, but if it had a name, it might.
Yep, you guys are exactly right. He gives the name to each chapter, playing on that joke that Hunter mentioned earlier, right? Max said that damn book, Cannery Row. I would have understood it better if I got a summary of the chapter beforehand. Then the name of the chapters are oftentimes don't make much sense, right? He's oftentimes just playing on words and stuff with each one of these chapters. But yeah, no other book in Steinbeck's canon did he name chapters, just this one. Each chapter isn't very long either. Usually the most pages a chapter goes is 4 or 5 pages. So think back to those big chunky chapters in the Grapes of Wrath, right? Definitely a different type of book here. He's keeping all his chapters short and crisp and to the point. He's mostly painting a lot of scenes and vignettes in this book, compared to a lot of his others. So you can kind of see how he's playing around with form with all these different innovations. And the character of the author in the book, remember the author that he keeps talking about? He keeps trying to write his book. That's often said to be Steinbeck making fun of himself, that author that's in the book.
I was wondering if that was what that was whenever I was reading through it.
Yeah, he's trying to write this book full of like intense symbolism and all this stuff. A lot of scholars think that Steinbeck making fun of his early works, like To a God Unknown. Like he tried to overkill it with his symbolism and stuff like that. So it's said to be Steinbeck making fun of his own early works and how how he was trying to be a little too pretentious. Um, just looking back at his own art and making fun of it. So you see a little bit of that kind of thing here too. I don't know. That's just one scholar's opinion that that's what that character represents, is Steinbeck himself. I think it's a convincing argument though. I think it makes sense if you go back and think about his whole body of work. Um, to God, I know To God Unknown was one of the favorites in the class. It's one of my favorites too. But you can definitely kind of see how that book was the work of a young author who hadn't quite figured it out yet. Um, Compared to this one where he's at the height of his powers, right? It's kind of like early Shakespeare versus later Shakespeare, right? A lot of Shakespeare's early stuff was fun, like Richard III and some of his comedies, Much Ado About Nothing and stuff like that. But his later works are where he kind of figured himself out are the most famous ones, like the tragedies, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Twelfth Night, the comedy. So this, yeah, I think it's a fun interpretation of that character, Steinbeck making fun of his early work. Yeah, I'm glad that I gave you guys this one instead of the Winter of Their Discontent. Now, Winter of Their Discontent's just another book that's very angry, and like by the time we got to this book was written in '53. By the time you get to the '60s, Steinbeck's starting to become like a cranky old man, right? Um, yeah, he doesn't like the way that the world is going. By the time we get to the '60s, like he was very much a conservative old man looking at these new movements that were happening in the '60s, like the sexual revolution and stuff. And it's a great book, but it very much reads like a cranky old man kind of book. Um, yeah, this one I think is a better way to end the class than that one. I would still recommend it. Of all the works we didn't read, Winter of Their Discontent is probably the one I would recommend the most. But I think this one kind of leaves a nice, um, it's a nice way to end the course, especially after reading a lot of really depressing stuff. So, what was after finishing the semester? What was your guys' favorite? I know your favorite might not even necessarily be what you're writing about. Um, which book was your favorite of the semester?
Probably of Mice and Men.
Nice man. Yeah, that's a great book. It's hard to argue that, right? It leaves it. You'll never forget that. Everybody who reads that book doesn't forget it, I think.
I have to agree with that. I mean, it's a classic and made into a wonderful movie, and you could bring it up, and a bunch of people will know exactly what you're talking about. So I'd have to say that Of Mice and Men is my um, favorite of the course as well.
What about you, Hunter?
I think To a God Unknown was probably my favorite one that we read. There's definitely like chapters and pieces of other works that I really liked as well, but overall, that was probably my favorite one.
Yeah, I think my favorite will always be The Grapes of Wrath. I know when I think it was partially just because when I read it for the first time, like I think that book changed how I think about the world. So that's one reason why I think The Grapes of Wrath will always be my favorite of the lot. Um, East of Eden's a great book too. Like it's his longest one. It's his epic, and I think that one went highly up on my list after rereading it again this semester. So I would probably rank it number 2. Cannery Row would probably be my number 3, or we'll say Cannery Row / Sweet Thursday. Um, I won't differentiate them. I'll just glue them together. Yeah, so you guys got through intense study of a single author, so you know more about Steinbeck than 99% of the population at this point. So, what do you got? What did you guys think? Did you like the single author courses are dying nationwide? Like you don't. It's very rare to have a course like this on just one single author. Like most of the time now, courses in the English departments are full of theory, like they're mostly theory courses, or like lots of times most courses are like a survey course where you'll read a ton of different authors. What do you guys think of the single author course? Do you feel like you kind of got to intimately know the writer in some respects? Um, maybe maybe you never want to read any more Steinbeck ever again after the single author course. Um, what's your what's your thoughts on just the structure of course in general? Like,
I really liked the structure of the class, and as a matter of fact, I wished um, I could have taken a couple of more classes like this. But at least I was able to do one of them. But I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much, Dr. Yeager, for your willingness to teach us a class like this. It was a great learning experience, and like I told you Wednesday, we've had some great conversations in our meetings. So wonderful experience.
thank you, Shane.
You're very welcome.
I like the single author course. I feel like even without like some sort of academic guidance, if I really enjoy a work from an author, I do this to myself anyways. So it was nice to have like a structured way of going about that. And to agree with Shane, thank you for the time, the conversation.
Yeah, you're very much welcome. I've enjoyed it. Every Friday has been very enjoyable this semester. So.
I've enjoyed it as well. I feel like there's a lot of positives to having multiple author um, studies. I felt like in those classes I found more of what I liked, or I was able to identify with more maybe. Um, but I didn't get to spend any time learning more about Sylvia Plath or um, any of the other authors that I would have liked to, like I did in this class. And still studying more with this paper too. Like we're finding out more as well. It's cool.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Braun. In those survey courses, you might read 1 or 2 poems from somebody, or one short story from Hemingway, or something like that. You don't really get to know an author very well just by giving a little taste of each one. So both courses are valuable. Both approaches to courses are valuable. Like, I think our World Lit course here, 1 and 2, like you get a lot of experience diving into multiple authors. Your British Lit and American Lit courses that you took in the program, same way, you get multiple authors. It's educating you on the long history and the canon. These types of courses are where you really immerse yourself in one author. I guess it depends on how much you enjoy the author. I've taken single author courses before on writers I didn't like. So so Steinbeck's a safe bet. Not most people. I've never met anybody who didn't like Steinbeck in some way. Probably don't want to. We probably wouldn't get along. But yeah, most of the time now, the only types of courses that are like this much is Shakespeare. Like a lot of college, that's something I'm going to fight for in our program the next few years. I think we need a Shakespeare course. Like, I think you guys are at a disservice not having a whole course on Shakespeare. But the Shakespeare course is most of the time the only single author course people English majors today take. A course like this is ultra rare on somebody that's not Shakespeare. You don't really, like, if you go to like the University of Mississippi, for instance, you might have like a William Faulkner single author course. The only Steinbeck single author course is in California at San Jose State, besides mine. So they're very rare. So I think it's a good experience. Poe, lots of times with somebody like Poe, you have single author courses based on him too, but even they're rare. Lots of times too, scholars who specialize in a single author, there's like a stigma against that. Yeah, I don't really like that either. Like, I think being a scholar, immersing yourself in a single author is a good undertaking. Well, guys, I don't think that having a meeting next Friday is necessary. At that point, you guys will be neck deep into your writing. So next Tuesday again will be when you submit your bibliographies, and after that you'll start working on your paper. And then our next meeting will be on 24th at 2 p.m. when we will talk about your drafts. So got a lot of work between now and then, but you guys need me for anything over the next week or so, you know where to find me. I'll be in the office next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So like, if you need to come back and do additional research or something like that, feel free to hit me up. I'll see everybody on the 24th, and then very shortly after that, we'll have graduation and all that stuff. We're almost at the end. So yeah, I'll see you guys again on the 24th. So, but if I don't see you before then, so good luck with the writing. Happy research, happy writing. I know you guys are tired. We're all tired at this point, but you'll get through it. You guys will produce something good. So I have faith.
Y'all have a great day.
Too.
All right.